Welcome back to the Masters Tour Seoul here in South Korea. As you can see, all the players left in the tournament after day one, still grinding away through round 8 of the Swiss. We're done with our first match. We saw Tars get absolutely destroyed, dare I say. And now we're going to be jumping into our next match, I believe, Bozzzton up against Eddie. A couple of Grandmasters going up against each other.
Yeah, and Eddie is playing the Quest Druid deck. Which we have seen a couple of times already on broadcast. Pretty unusual choice for the tournament. Not many of those, but he's been doing very well with it, clearly. Yeah,
he has. Is he going, I believe, for the King Ferris version?
Yes.
Which is a pretty spicy inclusion to fight back against some of the warriors in particular.
It's not just King Ferris. He has at least the at least the Enlightened. That's what it was. It's like not the Trailblazer, not the
Stargazer. Yeah. What's she doing now?
Exactly. She's Enlightened now. She has reached a point of being very zen, and now she's apparently a druid. And yeah, it's particularly against the warrior decks, has access to up to 4 copies of Chef Nomi effectively, because you have Nomi and Floop, and you can copy Nomi and Floop with Elise. And it's not actually a singleton deck itself, but it has the ability to power through its deck with Nourish, drawing enough cards, as well as being able to cycle your Wraths and such that you just get late in the game and, okay, well, I can just use this Elise naturally and take advantage of it to just create an insurmountable series of threats.
And I think that was one of the things that we came to as a community, or at least the top players did surprisingly quickly after Saviors of Uldum, which is that you don't have to play a singleton deck to play these singleton cards. Because I remember with the previous expansion, with the original Reno, it took a long time before players were playing like Reno Freeze Mage with duplicates, because there was so much draw. But now, like day one, people were playing multiple copies of Anubisath Sentinel, Overflow, Nourish, Oasis Surge.
People have learned, right? Yeah. And here we're getting into that first game, and the coin is such a valuable resource for the Quest Druid deck because it allows you to actually get your quest going right away. You're able to play the quest in turn 1, coin, and assuming you don't expend your mana, all of your mana on each turn, you're able to have your quest online for your turn 5, which means that Oasis Surger can be absolutely devastating.
And it will be. Eddie going with the coin on turn 1 in order to get the quest activated heading into turn 5 for the Oasis Surger, I think is very smart, especially as he has pretty much the dream curve. He got the Discovery on turn 2 to float a mana, and then Crystal Merchant as well on turn 3 to keep the draw rolling.
Yeah, this is a deck that in a lot of matchups can... Ooh, that's another great draw. The Crystal Merchant here going to give him a little bit of additional resources, kind of put Bozzzton in a situation, well, do I want to deal with this right now? And now, Eddie's next turn, he doesn't have necessarily a great play unless he can make good use of that War Druid Lodi. But he is running into that turn 5 where now he has another option with the Starfall if he chooses not to use the Oasis Surger.
Bozzzton on the other side, not with a particularly aggressive hand. He's lacking the obviously the Sorcerer's Apprentice in order to go for the big Mana Cyclone Banana turn, which is a little unfortunate because that's one of the ways that you can definitely overcome this Druid, I think, is by going nice and wide, especially if you can find mirror images. I find are very, very useful against the Druid because what are they going to do? Crash 2 Oasis Surges into a couple of taunts? It can be a big pain in the behind.
Yeah, it doesn't really care that he doesn't have the Sorcerer's Apprentice, though. Just going to go ahead and use those. He wants to use the bananas in order to buff up this Banana Buffoon in order to take out this Crystal Merchant. He doesn't want Eddie to get more cards from it, and this is the best way to still keep his hand full. Ooh. Oh, wow. That is a lot of power coming off of that Mana Cyclone. Finds a Conjurer's Calling, finds a Frost Nova, a Polymorph. A lot of action there for Bozzzton.
Yeah, that'll do. Leaves Eddie with somewhat of a difficult choice here because my first instinct with this turn was to go for Rush to just charge into the Banana Buffoon, but then I was thinking, what's he really afraid of on the next turn? And the answer is pretty much just Giant.
Right.
In which case, this sets up for killing that, and then the Oasis Surger can take out the Banana Buffoon. I think this is a very smart play.
Yeah, and now Bozzzton, he's in a little bit of an interesting situation because with that Lodi down in the Poisonous mode, playing the Giant is not very appealing.
Yeah.
He would love to play Giant and then Conjurer's Calling. He does have the splitting image, right? So he could splitting image to protect one of whatever minion gets attacked by by this, but there is the problem that he can't play that alongside the giant, and his opponent's going to be Oasis Surging next turn very likely anyway.
And I think for Bozzzton in this situation, I like valuing this giant very, very highly, because the rest of his hand is, you know, it's all stall, bit of removal, all that goodness. And I think his game plan at the moment is very much make sure this giant sticks, try and Conjurer's Calling it, and then just freeze, and just kind of cheese out the game from that point. Because the Druid, while it has some strong removal options in the form of Oasis Searcher, it does not have the hard removal that a lot of the time you need to take out all those giants.
There is the Oasis Surger, which does give Eddie the opportunity to play around a splitting image by attacking into the Cyclone first, which he does exactly. This does give the possible opportunity to Bozzzton next turn if Eddie just sort of takes a trade here to Frost Nova alongside his giant, which prevents these Oasis Surgers and the Lodi from being able to actually take out the giant, which he's hoping to play and have an opportunity to attack, and then Conjurer's Calling.
That's true. And then it gets a little bit awkward for Eddie, because he really doesn't want to go floop Oasis Surger for 2 5/6s just to take out a giant. I mean, it's not bad if you have to and you're in a bind, but...
Yeah, and here I think Eddie's debating, do I want to attack into the Banana Buffoon and risk getting this just killed by a hero power, or... you know, attack into the 2/2. Either way, the second one would be able to kill whatever it is that he attacks into, which I think is part of the motivation to possibly attack into the 2/2, but he decides to go ahead and take out the 4-attack minion.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if he's met with Giant plus Freeze, it doesn't matter whether he still has the Poisonous or not, because he'll still probably have to end up rushing in the 2 Oasis Surges off of the Floop, just to not be completely destroyed by a big Conjurer's Calling turn.
Okay, he's actually just going to go with Giant plus Conjurer's Calling and a freeze effect here. Doesn't really care. Okay, I like this. This gives him the ability to get a board down that, you know, he preserves this giant. Yes, one of them dies, right? But he still has the other one, unless Eddie commits additional resources to this, which is sort of the same situation he would have been the other way anyway. If there was something that he could do to take down a giant, well, he's going to be able to do that with you know, the board, even if he does commit a Frost Nova.
Which leaves Eddie in a bit of a difficult situation, because, you know, if he was to go for Nourish this turn, even though it would ramp him up, you know, even if he got double Starfall, that still wouldn't be a board clear on a bunch of big giants. So if he can, he obviously wants to remove them now, given that he knows there's a second Conjurer's Calling in hand, which pretty much just necessitates the Oasis Surges.
Yeah, it's a rough scenario. You know, with the Oasis Surger specifically frozen already on the board. Yeah, there's no way to get around this with any sort of spot removal specifically. He can Starfall, but that doesn't even kill both of them, even with the poisonous minion, simply because there's no additional damage that can come through.
Man, quite a lot of good draws as well. If he'd found a Bees or a Wrath, he would have been able to take out these...
Excuse me, a what?
I apologize. A Bees!
Thank you.
Or a Wrath. Or I guess a Wrath, as you might say. Is that how
Wrath?
Americans pronounce it?
No,
Wrath?
it's Wrath.
That's what they say in The Simpsons. Nelson calls it Grapes of Wrath, I remember.
I mean, The Simpsons is also, like, just a comedy. It's a cartoon. It's not... Is that how you think? Like, do you just use Bart Simpson as...
That is what America
you think
is.
Of us?
Yes.
Oh my God.
That was my cultural exposure to America as a child.
Right. Well, that explains a lot.
I mean, there are worse representations you could have.
Yeah, like the real world.
Like the news. Yeah.
Don't get me going. Let's talk about the game. All right, well, Bozzzton does pick up another giant, so he does have the ability to rebuild this board with giant plus Conjurer's Calling. Eddie has now used his floop here with the 2 copies of Oasis Surger, so does not have a great way to deal with this second board of giants.
Which I imagine is what Bozzzton will gear up to. Like, he's, again, he is correctly, I think, hesitant to throw out these giants where they are vulnerable to just die, because the rest of his hand is incredibly underwhelming. It does not do anything that you want to do in this matchup.
Right.
But I think he's realized 2 Oasis Surges down, if you count the Floop one. At this point, it's so unlikely that it's killed off, and then he's hoping he can just freeze out the board for the rest of the game and push face.
Yeah, so Eddie, he can nourish here, and he has the innervate as well. So if he were to nourish, he could still play Starfall, but again, that's just not quite enough for what he needs to do here. You know, he at this point at least he knows both halves of this Conjurer's Calling are gone, right? So he's able to not necessarily have to kill both of these.
Yeah.
There's at least not the immediate pressing, like, okay, if I don't kill these, there's just more coming, and whatever I leave over in the, on the board is you know, going to be able to value trade and then get an additional wave of giants coming. So he can at least approach this marginally differently.
And I guess the situation is very different to last turn, where Eddie previously knew there was a second half of Conjurer's Calling, whereas this time he can tank the 15 damage for 1 turn at least. And there's a reasonable chance that he won't be met with another board full of giants.
Well, this is pretty powerful. So he does pick up the Wrath off of the Nourish here, so he's able to take down 1 of the giants. And he finds the Oasis Surger. One of the big problems here for Eddie, though, is the fact that if he does, say, make a big board with King Feoris, he is just going to get wrecked by Frost Nova.
He is, but as it currently stands, like obviously on the average mage hand, Eddie does need to still be afraid of, you know, some other kind of big minion coming down, Khadgar Conjurer's Calling, something like that. After he clears up with Oasis Surger plus Swipe or Oasis Surger plus, I don't know, Tending Tauren, whatever he wants to do on the following turn, Bozzzton doesn't have all too much follow-up, and maybe just a big King Feoris board would be able to get him there.
The pickup of the Luna's Pocket Galaxy doesn't really... it's obviously a very powerful card, right? But that's not really what Bozzzton wants right now. His hand is full of sort of reactive, situational things. He'd love to just be able to put more pressure on. What he was really looking for was another Conjurer's Calling, you know, something that actually sets him up. Even just like Arcane Intellect, I think was a better draw for him there than the Luna's Pocket Galaxy, because he wants to try and close out this game during this window that he has.
I agree.
Where he has this pressure. The second Oasis Surger draw for Eddie does give him the ability to clear this off if he so chooses. There is, of course, the King Feoris, a little bit awkward in this situation, as I mentioned, thanks to the presence of the Frost Novas in Bozzzton's hand. Yeah. And he even just knows there's another Ray of Frost. So there's just the possibility, given that Bozzzton just only played Ping plus Lunas, that's a handful of reactive cards. Maybe it's Sea Giants that can't really be cast, but even that makes Feoris into Sea Giant Frost Nova is just absolute suicide.
That's dreadful. Yeah, yeah. And so then maybe Eddie takes it a little bit more. A more temperate route, where he just goes for a couple of minions at a time, nothing too explosive, to make sure that, you know, Bozzzton doesn't really want to commit big freeze, big removal, but he still can't cast the Sea Giant, and the chip damage should be able to get him there.
I wonder if we might just see Eddie play the Oasis Surger to rush this down and then innervate out a Tending Tauren. Yeah, that's what we're going to see. So this gives him the ability to build up something of a board and get the Giant off, because the Giant being on the board is the scariest thing here. This does put Eddie in a situation where there is Sea Giant, but not Sea Giant Frost Nova available, because Bozzzton's only at 9 mana. Yeah. But that AI post Lunas is an extremely powerful draw, because that represents a lot of possibilities for cheap development. Yep. Alongside one of those Frost Novas. Yep, there's a Giant.
Wow.
Ooh.
Apart from Luna herself, that was pretty much the best couple of draws that Bozzzton could have hoped for over those turns. And so now how does he approach this? He could play just Giant. Could he go Sea Giant and then Sorcerer's Apprentice and then another Sea Giant and then triple Ray of Frost to freeze the board? I think that's possible, and then he could just try and go face for the next couple of turns, because 2 Giants and an Apprentice is a lot more difficult to deal with than just 1 Giant.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there is Giant plus Sorcerer's Apprentice plus Giant, and then triple Ray of Frost. Yeah, can give him just lethal on board.
Yeah. Wow, he's taking it a lot slower.
Okay, this is a very reactive play for Bozzzton, which I'm a little surprised by.
Yeah, I was expecting after seeing 3 Oasis Surges effectively, you know that they're all gone.
Yeah,
the reactivity is a lot lower.
Right, what is Eddie going to do here if you just play out your Giants and freeze everything?
I agree. I'm not sure.
I am pretty surprised by that because I do feel like Bozzzton had been firmly in the driver's seat, and now sort of ceding the tempo over to Eddie, and getting a turn with nothing on the opposing side of the board and actual minions in play. This is even an opportunity to play like this overflow, right? Which is such an awkward card for Eddie to actually find a window for. The King Ferris is obviously pretty tempting too, but maybe that's what Bozzzton's thinking, is that he's like, okay, well, I want to ensure that I have the ability to lock down whatever Eddie falls up with, but he has 2 Frost Novas in addition to those Ray of Frost, which is why I agreed very strongly with the play that you were suggesting.
I guess I could be making a mistake. Maybe it's a single Ray of Frost and not a twin-spelled version on the right.
The left one, no, that's definitely a new Ray
That's
of
a full
Frost.
one. Okay,
yeah, I think it looks like Eddie's just going in, making a big board.
Which makes sense. I think this is good recognition from Eddie that, even if this fails, he's losing in the late game eventually. Now that Luna's Pocket Galaxy is played, he's got to get going.
Okay, well, there's a Conjurer's Calling too. Yes. So now it's even bigger.
This is the turn, I suppose, that Bozzzton was gearing up for. And this does pretty much lock Eddie out of the game, which meant, maybe Bozzzton was afraid of some nonsense happening later on in the game. But it's not even like Eddie has Zephyrus in his deck. The only singleton card he's running is at least the Enlightened.
I mean, this is still definitely a situation where I feel like Bozzzton is very advantaged, right? Because now he's just doing exactly what we were discussing, building a big board into even bigger.
I mean, you can just do whatever you want here. There's no way for the Druid to clear this board if you just go all in.
Right.
It's not running Malagos, King Forest. There's not even any room on board.
Yep. Second Giant, second Conjuring.
I think he's just wondering, is there any way this can go wrong? Are there any minions I can summon that lose me the game? I don't think so on the 10 mana slot. Colossus of the Moon and the Taunt thrown into the pool doesn't really make it any worse.
I mean, is there a world in which you like hit Hakar, they kill your Hakar, and you somehow die?
I guess so, yeah.
I think so. There's no way that happens.
On this, killing off the big bad Archmage, there aren't any 6-drops that could lose in the game. Either like Dustfall and Aviana's 5, isn't it? And
right.
Yeah. I think there's pretty much no way that Bozzzton loses this. We're searching pretty hard for nothing.
Double swipe here from Eddie is, enough to kill off a minion.
It's pittance.
He can kill one of the 8/8s in the Sorcerer's Apprentice, still leaves 16 on board.
I guess he's wondering if he can survive with the Hidden Oasis plus swipe, but that doesn't even kill anything other than the Apprentice.
Right. Yeah, he goes to 26, which does leave him... Nope, still dead.
Yeah, I think the writing's pretty clearly on the wall here. And for both of these players, getting a single loss here is pretty devastating. Right. 5-2 record is obviously very respectable through 7 rounds of Swiss. But to have a good chance with tiebreakers of making it through, I think they pretty much want to win out from here on in.
Yeah, and Eddie's not dead on the board, but Frost Nova plus triple Ray of Frost on the taunt does mean that there is enough damage coming through. Actually, no, it's not quite. Right, he's actually 1 off lethal with this
8,
clear.
24, 25. Yes, you're correct. Okay, well he's
still alive.
Dead. Yeah. Oh, and that was only a single copy of Ray of Frost.
Oh. Oh, on the middle.
Yeah.
The left side I knew is okay. Well, that actually makes the situation we were talking about a couple of times ago. I thought there was actually just one of those which had been.
Which makes sense. Why he'd go for that play.
Yeah. Okay. Now everything makes a bit more sense in terms of how that played out.
Finally, Freddy. It's kind of nice that we're in modern spell druid world where we don't have to constantly say, well, he could just draw Yogg, I suppose, as a chance to win the game. We know this one is well and truly over at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's no swipe plus Starfall here. Yep, and Eddie does decide he has seen enough. And Bozzzton takes a 1-0 lead in the series.
Yes, Eddie, I think, is one of the few remaining players from Lazarus in with a chance of making it through to the top 16. Obviously, Bloodyface sadly had to abscond his spot in the tournament due to personal reasons. And then I think Language Hacker had a good start, but then a little bit of a rough run in the mid stages.
Started 3-0 and did 4-3 yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
So the 3-loss threshold is really where things start to get tough for you to actually make it through to the cutoff, right? Players want to try and stay, okay, 2 losses, you're if you manage to stick that way all the way through the 12 rounds, you're going to make it through. But at 3 losses, especially earlier on, it's really putting your chances up to tiebreakers, and that can be rough.
It can indeed, which is why it's looking pretty good for Bozzzton now, 1-0 up. This will be a nice redemption for him, I think, after a fairly poor season in Grandmasters. He's in the European region, which I would argue is probably the most highly stacked with players at the absolute top of their game.
I'm just curious, what region were the top 2 finishers from the last Masters Tour from? I don't remember. Do you remember?
I don't actually know.
Really?
No.
Oh, I'm trying to set you up for a beat, and you don't even know. It's Dog and Gallon.
Who? Yes, I am aware that NA did rather well at the last Masters Tour. EU did have a little bit of a dip. Who's our current world champion? Where are they from?
Dude, I picked him. It's Hunter Ace.
Oh. Did you pick him, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah.
I just can't beat you. Stop being good at everything.
Come on.
Oh. I would, however, say that Bozzzton is still in with a pretty good shot. The Druid, I think, has limited options to switch into to be able to try and fight back against what the Mage is going for, because it's a weakness of the class, right? They don't have that removal against Cyclone Mage. And so even if they can go for a more aggressive strategy, it still struggles to get there, because I would argue Eddie's hand, that's as aggressive as the deck can get.
Right.
It went turn 5 Oasis Surger, and he could have gone turn 6 Oasis Surger as well.
Eddie had an excellent draw last game, right?
Yeah.
And Bozzzton's draw was, I mean, it was good, right? He had Giant and Calling, and well, now he has Luna's Pocket Galaxy. So you know, this is, I really do think I agree with you that this is one of the sort of weaknesses of Druid specifically, is not just dealing with Mage, but specifically dealing with the freezes out of Mage. You're playing a deck that requires a board in order to both fight against your opponent's board as well as win the game.
Yeah.
And if your opponent just keeps freezing you, which this deck can do a ton of, you end up being in a really tough spot.
Bozzzton presented with a really weird option there. I was talking about the merits of Mirror Image being able to be a little taunt that's very annoying to get in the way of Oasis Surges, or just allow your minions to go face for a longer period of time. Research Project, however, when you have Luna's Pocket Galaxy active, becomes a lot more tempting, because obviously your average draw is significantly better than your opponent's aggro draw, sorry. But at the same time, Quest Druid is generally quite low on cards, and if you can keep them low on cards, that's one of the best ways to beat them.
Right. And that's why, you know, one of the reasons this Crystal Merchant that Eddie has here is pretty crucial for the deck.
So good.
Feeds you a little bit of additional resources. And AI for Bozzzton here will feed him more.
Yeah, I think AI is reasonable here. We've seen players more and more saving the Arcane Intellects until after Luna's Pocket Galaxy comes down in order to draw those 1-mana minions instead of at their full mana cost.
He's got 2 of them.
He's got the second one in hand. Exactly, so he has a little bit more liberty. I like Eddie's choice here of going for a slightly more aggressive play of playing the Power of the Wild out there, because obviously it can be used after the quest has been activated for more value. But I'd rather have a 3-2 in play.
Bozzzton's hand is gross. He's got AI, he's got Stargazer Luna, he just got that Pocket Galaxy off on
Even the Apprentice is nuts here. Just being able to cheat out mana, because that's the only thing he's worried about, is that he won't be able to do all his disgusting stuff in time. But I think as it currently stands, he definitely will be able to. I stand somewhat corrected, though, in terms of the deck that Eddie can switch to. It seems like he has actually got a pretty strong anti-mage variant. It's not the anti-control one that I was expecting. He's got 2 Savage Roars, 2 Druid of the Claws, one of which we can see in hand, and a very spicy Dalaran Librarian.
Yeah, that's actually awesome.
That's very cool.
We were just talking about how the vulnerability of this deck so much is its susceptibility to freezes.
Yes.
That it's a very board-based deck. In Dalaran Librarian, you can unfreeze 2 of your minions and actually just get some damage. And the problem there, I think, is that a lot of your minions, the power of them comes from buffing them.
Yeah.
And buffing up your minions and then silencing them so they can attack is a little counterproductive in a way. But the Druid of the Claws plus Savage Roars does give him the ability to just kind of burst damage out of nowhere. And if he just has even a little board, Bozzzton needs to respect that. And speaking of respect, well, that's a Sea Giant.
Wow.
We could just see Sea Giant plus Conjurer's Calling right now.
I mean, there's so many options, right? I think Bozzzton should wait before he goes off with Luna. Like, even though we could see Luna, Apprentice, Sea Giant, double mirror image as well to really just lock down this board. I think he'll play it a little bit slower because, like, Stargazer Luna is just the uber refill of the hand.
Right. I mean, he can play the Sorcerer's Apprentice into both AI and Conjurer's Calling if he wants this turn, right? No, he's
no, not
quite.
quite.
No, he's 1 mana short there. But he could play Sorcerer's Apprentice into Mirror, Conjurer's Calling Giant to protect the Giant and the Conjure, the things coming off of it.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most broke back of them all?
Oh,
my lord.
Well.
Druid does not beat that.
Answer is the Daily Double. 2 10-10s. Yeah. One of them that's 2 10-10s. Huh.
I mean, Eddie can also summon 5 mana 10-10 worth of stats, and his has Rush. But, well, Bozzzton did 3 mana 20-20 worth of stats, and he has another spell left over after it.
That Luna's Pocket Galaxy is a hell of a card.
Yes. Eddie now pretty clearly, I would imagine, on the burn plan, which I don't think is locked out by any stretch of the imagination. Like, Bozzzton is very clearly in the lead, going on the aggressive here. But if Eddie can get in just a little bit of chip damage and top deck a Savage Roar...
How much damage are you thinking he can do?
I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic for him here.
I'm trying to be realistic. Let's say he plays Oasis Surger here, right? And kills these. Yeah, he kills the two 0/2s and gets 4 damage into the opponent's face. Okay, Bozzzton's at 20.
I mean, Savage Roar's lethal then, right?
If he
clears
never
nothing
plays another card.
Yes. I don't know. Like I said, optimistic.
Yeah, I mean that's some optimism.
Delusion is another word for it.
You said it.
Yeah.
Not me. And I mean, Bozzzton, he's going to go ahead and play the Apprentice. Oh, look, a freeze effect.
Yeah.
Oh, look, another freeze effect.
And so, again, the Dalaran Librarian, maybe he's thinking, Dalaran Librarian, innovate, double Savage Roar. Does that ever lose him the game? I don't even think so. It would just be 2 3/3s then, right, that could attack face, and yeah, that doesn't even do it.
If you had Librarian, Innervate, double Savage Roar, it's +4 for each, and it's +12 total. Yeah, it wouldn't even be enough.
It wouldn't even be lethal.
Also, there's a mirror image.
Yep. Bozzzton realizes he can just close this one out.
So that was effectively, it was setting up turn 6 for turn 7 lethal.
Yep.
And that was really a couple of things. One, the incredible power of Pocket Galaxy, right?
Yes,
and then
of course.
The vulnerability of the Druid deck, 2 big minions and freeze effects, right? We saw all 3 of those sort of come into play. 20 power on the board on turn 5, and then everything sort of just cascading from there.
And I think this is one of the reasons why people predicted Druid would be so weak in the metagame, because obviously people didn't quite know where the quest would stack up, but lack of removal is so crucial in this metagame. When there's Luna's Pocket Galaxy, Giant, Conjurer's Calling, you just need to be able to kill those off, or you'll die, which means that the Druid does unfortunately take the loss there, but for Bozzzton taking a much-needed victory. We're going to take a quick break before we come back with, I believe, more matches from around the tavern here in Round 8. We'll be right back from Masters Tour Seoul.